Hey everybody, welcome to the David Guttman podcast, CryoCon 2025 edition. I am so excited for this guest, Dave Asprey, the father of biohacking, I believe is the moniker that you have, among others. So my first introduction to you was Bulletproof Coffee.
Yep.
Years and years ago. I've been keto for a good number of years now. My dad, believe it or not, has been on a ketogenic diet since I think I was 10. I'm turning 59 tomorrow.
Wow.
So he's been on a ketogenic diet for almost 40 years. He was 320 pounds. Now he's 160. But anyway, so you're a 4-time New York Times best-selling author, and I know you got a new book coming out, which we'll talk about. CEO of Upgrade Labs, a top 100 podcast, The Human Upgrade. And then I was really surprised to see this, that you were selling to an entrepreneur in your dorm room in college, but the Exodus data centers you were involved in too?
I was a co-founder of their professional services group. So
I could believe that.
It was like that part of the business grew to $100 million a quarter. So I had an office right outside the CEO, and they let me attend board meetings when I was 25 years old. And the rule was you're not allowed to speak. I was a technical expert and had not a lot of business skills, but I knew the business inner workings.
Okay.
So that was a magical career time, just seeing all that rapid growth and just making something that really mattered.
And so now I have to ask then, so what was the most useful thing you learned, 1 or 2 items from those board meetings that you were able to attend but not speak in?
Well, I used to have Asperger's syndrome. And so I'm like, I see the world through systems and technology, and like I know how stuff works, and I just kind of know it in my bones. And I would attend these executive staff meetings and the board meetings, and I thought they were all insane. And then I read 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God, they're not crazy. They're playing a different game. And I said, I'm gonna have to learn this game, right? And then I said, well, it's about the technology. But then I started seeing the best technology always loses. And it's usually because the person who creates the best technology is obsessive compulsive about it, and the person with the best marketing wins. So being an inventor who has the best thing in the world and it's in your garage and no one uses it, you're just a failed inventor, even though you solved the problem. So if you want to do things, you have to know how to recognize the best in the world at something and how to tell the world about it and how to navigate all of the pirates and thieves and venture capitalists and all the other people like that. And those 3 things are necessary if you want to have a big impact.
Yeah, it's beta versus VCRs, all those example after example. But I was talking with someone earlier. I think it's something like 50 or 60% of the Fortune 500 companies in the year 2000 don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And it's all about hubris. It's all about ego and people being emotionally invested in being right instead of being clear-eyed and open-minded about making adjustments.
It's funny you mentioned that. My book that's just coming out now called Heavily Meditated is about my 25-year journey of studying with gurus and masters in different states of meditation, and also things that are faster or deeper than meditation. Because the problem with being a CEO or an entrepreneur, you have 24 hours in a day. And you have these guys saying, you have to do zone 2 cardio for 12 hours a week. They're wrong, by the way. Okay, so you got that, and then you do some other stuff. Oh, and maybe you have like a marriage, and you got to do some marital time, and some kids, and you have a business. Oh, and you're also supposed to meditate for another 2 hours a day. And you're like, when am I going to sleep? Oh, no, you have to sleep at least 6.5 hours. It doesn't work. So we have people like you and me, we're going to look at our businesses and say, if I can spend less money on my marketing, I've driven my marketing efficiency and my company improves. And at the same time, you go to the gym and you never measure the return on exercise spend. I just made that up. Right. The same as the return on ad spend, right? So I have technology at Upgrade Labs. It's one of the 9 companies I have right now. This is a big franchise company, 9 locations open, another 20 something coming online. Former COO of Equinox and Orange Theory is my president there. And with this biohacking business, if you'll give me 5 minutes 3 times a week, I will deliver 6 times better results than an hour a day in a spin class. And that's 15 minutes a week, the amount of time you spend brushing your teeth. So you have these people, it's like, if you're a CEO, I believe that putting all of my ads into billboards is going to change the world. So you just keep doing it year after year, regardless of whether anyone buys anything, that is going to the gym. Right? Because you do not get very good benefits per minute at the gym. So I started just being very data driven on my own body. And if you look at the cover of Heavily Meditated, I'm about 5% body fat right now. Like I'm 52 on the calendar. I don't really identify with that. I'm 28% is my age. But I'm sitting there with my shirt off, and I used to be a 300-pound computer hacker, right? So if that kind of transformation can happen, I exercise 20 minutes a week, right? I have AI powering everything I do. Like it's very meaningful and focused. I'm getting the right signal in, right? I don't have quite the same muscle mass, but I'm not exactly weak, right? I'm lean, ripped, and I look like I play water polo, and it's insane. This should be impossible, except it's not impossible. You just follow the numbers for your biology and for your consciousness the same way you do in your business.
Well, I'm curious, by background, because I knew you had lost a great deal of weight. I have another question about that, but I'm going to come back to that. I'm curious, did you always want to be an entrepreneur, or is it something you just fell into? Was your dad an entrepreneur? Like, what gave you that sort of, like you said, you're running a bunch of companies now?
My family is mostly national laboratory PhD researcher types. Grandparents met at Los Alamos National Labs. Grandmother's a PhD nuclear engineer. So my dad worked for a national laboratory. And so these are deep, hardcore scientists. And I've just wanted to since I was a kid. I used to open all the junk mail to see how they were writing it because I was just curious. I also had Asperger's syndrome, so that was probably part of it. And then I would look at just, how does this work? And it just seemed so interesting. And I read an old Entrepreneur magazine about what a venture capitalist was. I'm like, I want to be one of those. I could help all these businesses. I've raised $90 million from VCs, and I don't think I necessarily want to be one right now because they can be a little predatory, but there are good ones. And just having gone through all that, I've had a job on Sand Hill Road at a venture capital firm, and I've been an entrepreneur. So I had this desire since I was young because I thought that having money would make me happy. And the problem was, I made $6 million when I was 26 years old. And this is at that Exodus Communications, the first big data center company. And I looked at a friend, and I said, I'll be happy when I have 10. And I'd been in Entrepreneur magazine when I was 23 for selling the first thing ever sold over the internet, right? Before e-commerce had a name. I'm like, oh, I'll be happy when I'm famous. And I was in like 80 magazines as an early 20-year-old. It didn't make me happy. I tried to get married in my 20s. Didn't make me happy either. I'm like, nothing works. So a lot of Heavily Meditated, my new book, I'm going through, right, well, what are the things that work? And what I've learned is that if you enter the path of biohacking, maybe you just want to lose weight, you want to get rid of the brain fog, whatever, but pretty soon you're going to get your energy back, your body's going to work, and you're going to say, well, now I want to live a lot longer, so biohacking equals longevity, and I also want to be happy, and that equals a path of consciousness and awareness. And that's weird. If you want to be a CEO, you have to be the most resilient person in your company. You have to be able to hold your state no matter what's happening, because if you lose your mind internally or externally, your team will see or feel it. If it's just like everything's fine and inside you're like, it's not fine, they know. It dysregulates the whole team. So you have to be the best at those things if you really want to have an organization that works right. And I've made tons and tons of mistakes along the way there, but that's the game that we're really playing. So biohacking is something that took off first, because I wrote it for entrepreneurs and tech people. It took off there. Within 2 months of that, hedge fund managers. And then it went straight to Hollywood and to the recording industry, because these are people who have to have brains that work. They have to, and then pro athletes as well. They have to have cognitive function, they have to look good, and they have to have full presence. So this is about more power, more regulation of your power. And that's really how biohacking happened. I mean, I wouldn't have imagined that Rick Rubin would mention bulletproof coffee in the New York Times, right, without even knowing me at the time. We got to be friends after that. And then Ed Sheeran on the red carpet is talking about this. And Jimmy Fallon, Shailene Woodley's, they spent 2 minutes talking about bulletproof coffee on national TV. I didn't pay for any of this. I didn't even know what was happening. I got a Facebook notification of it, right? Because it worked for people who are at the highest level of visibility and mental performance and physical performance. And that is what CEOs need.
One of the things I've struggled with myself, and you mentioned happiness a couple times, I've been questioning myself whether happiness was the right goal for me. And I use the word contentment or satisfaction or peacefulness. I'm curious how you think about that.
The real word is peace. And I go through the framework that explains all of biohacking in Heavily Meditated. And it's that your body processes reality before you do. And this is provable with neuroscience. So I've had more than 1,000 CEOs come to my brain upgrade facility in Seattle, 40 years of Zen. We glue electrodes to your head and we measure all of this stuff and show you how to change your state. And that knowledge comes into a book. That means you don't have to go up there, read the book, and figure out what's going to work for you. But the teachings from that about what works and what doesn't work have been the thing that opened it up most for me. And I think you had a different direction in your question there.
Well, it's just for me,
You're about happiness?
For me, happiness, it feels like it's external, right? And to me, contentment, I think people sometimes language is weird, right? It can mean different things to different people. For me, contentment is sort of just being internally comfortable in my own skin.
Okay.
Is kind of how I think about it. But
I get it. Well, here's what your body's doing when it processes reality. And a single bacteria will do this, a tree will do this. All life does this before there can be a thought. So number one, fear. Is it a threat? And we put about 9 times more energy into things that might be threats than we need to. And if you meditate or do the practices in the book, you probably get it down to 6 times. But your body will be biased for threats because it's alive. And that's just a fact of nature. That means since your body filters reality, threats to your company are not as big as you think they are. Your body will make them look bigger to keep you alive, as if you're not in there. So knowing that fear is the first thing, and that you can train your body to be less fearful, and then you'll have less fearful emotions. So fear, and then the second F word after that is food. Like fear of bacteria. If it's scary, secrete some poison or move away. And then food, eat everything because you might run out of food, right? And then the next F word, they're all F words, is something all life has to do to stay around forever. You know what that one is? No. Okay, multi-generational stuff. All life does it. Fear.
Family?
That was a good one. Usually people drop an F-bomb right there. But fear, I'm going to call it fertility.
Okay.
So basically...
Sort of family, indirectly.
Right? Exactly. So something happens in the world around you, and immediately, without thinking, without any of your brain even being engaged, the network of intelligence in your body goes, is it scary? Can I eat it? And can I hump it? Okay. This is the human condition. There's nothing wrong with that. Right? And the good news is the next F word after that is friend.
Okay.
Because all life will support its own species and the species around it in a beautiful, elegant dance, right? We're wired to do that. And then the final F word is forgiveness. And that's how humans become less fearful. It's how we evolve, right? So problem is you pour your fuel into the top bucket. And if you're fearful all the time because you have unresolved triggers and you're getting angry and just unbalanced all the time, that sucks up a lot of energy. And then what's left? I got to eat, right? And then you don't know how to eat. And like the average person, 1/3 of their thoughts are about food every day because they haven't managed their nutrition well. And then what's left? Well, okay, maybe there's some time for some OnlyFans or something, but a lot of marriages don't go where you want them to go.
Right.
And what's left for your community? Right? And what's left for it's an empty bucket.
Yeah.
So the game for entrepreneurs and for CEOs is, how do I become untriggered? And most people think untriggered means somebody comes into the boardroom and they say something that gets under your skin and you still smile, all right? And inside you're like, right? That's not untriggered. Untriggered means that the internal state didn't change.
Right.
And everyone has the ability to sense congruence. And that's when your external and internal state match. Well, if you're thinking, I've got this because I've learned how to behave myself, so I never let them see me sweat, but I'm still sweating. Right. No. I'm talking about don't sweat and don't let them see you sweat because you held your state no matter what's happening in the world around you. And that's called equanimity, right?
Have you ever seen the Brene Brown TED Talk about vulnerability being a superpower?
Absolutely, yeah. I've
It's my all-time favorite TED Talk, and it's like to me, like at least I try very hard to be the same, whether it's with my daughter, my wife, my friends, my coworkers, whatever. That there's just one version of David, not 5, because again, I think the only way you can really have human connection is to be authentic, which requires you to be vulnerable.
It requires you to be vulnerable, yes. So if you're holding those emotions in, it's not working. And if you have untamed emotions that are flopping around all over the place, you're going to yell at your kids, you're going to yell at your employees, you're going to act like an asshole, and you're going to have to, if you're a good person, make it right later. And if you're a narcissist, you're going to blame them for what you did. And if you're a sociopath, you knew you did it and you just got off on it. Right? So, I mean, that's the game.
Yeah, no, well, and it's funny because the whole premise of my podcast, interviewing CEOs with a decent moral compass, is because, you know, the world is replete with sociopath and even psychopathic C-level executives. It seems to be a magnet for that, in my experience.
Ooh. It is, and I want to go through like one chapter of Heavily Meditated with you.
Please.
This is the answer to your question.
Please.
I've, in addition to done all the physiology and neurology and biohacking stuff, studied with gurus and fasted in caves and old lineages and stuff like that, shamanic training, because like I'm just curious and I thought all this stuff was BS, but it turns out there's some wisdom there as well. So this is Lao Tzu's teachings. And these were taught to me by one of 9 living grandmasters of the oral lineage for 5,000 years for the people who protect the Emperor of China. The guy's name is Dr. Barry, who's also been on my show and a friend. And you'll see him backstage at my conference or even at a Tony Robbins conference, like, you know, doing his mystical stuff. And there's 4 kinds of people, and this is spelled out in Heavily Meditated. The first kind of people are category 1. They're win-win always. If they do something, the other person wins and they win. It doesn't have to be the same amount, but everybody benefits. 5% people, very rare. The next type is category 2. They're win-win usually, but they make mistakes. And with those people, if you say you made a mistake, they're like, oh my God, I was unaware. I'm sorry. You know, let me, you know, pay you back. Let me apologize, whatever it's going to take, right? Those are the only 2 kinds of people you want to hire.
Okay.
Category 3 people, they're win-lose. For them to win, someone else has to lose, but they don't know it.
Wow.
And as an example, I had an executive at Bulletproof, and Bulletproof did $140 million a year in revenue when I was running it. And I ended up getting removed from my position. Like the board kicked me out of the company, which was my fault because I didn't structure my board properly. And you got to own that at a certain point. But along the path, I had one executive. She would look at me every day, look at the board every week. We're on track. We just raised $30 million. We're going to lose $4 million by the end of the year and grow 40%. So we're on track. We're on track. We're on track. Well, December 1st, she goes, we might lose $5 million, not $4 million. I'm like, that's not great, but it's still well within tolerances, right?
Right.
And then December 31st, she goes, oopsie, we lost $28 million.
Okay.
And that was kind of hard. So I was like, what the,
Right.
how? And she's like, well, I was first in my class at Harvard, and I was a very big executive at Amazon, and I don't fail. So therefore, I could not have been failing. I mean, she didn't say those exact words, but
Right.
It was this inability to see, because her form of, as I'm assuming things, of narcissism was, I don't fail. Therefore, I cannot see myself fail, right? And it was to the point where when the time came to remove that executive from their position, she looked at me and said, you should give me more stock options. And I'm like, why?
Right.
And it was because I'm good. Right? Like there was no rationale. And so I'm not suggesting it's a bad person thing. It's a deep lack of awareness. And a lot of executives have that, which is why I've taken more than 1,000 executives through the 5-day thing at 40 Years of Zen, where we have neuroscientists, we're gluing electrodes, like, let me show you what's going on in there. Like, you think you're free? Like my friend Craig went through, he runs a 1,200 person company. And he came out and said, oh my God, all my success is because I'm still trying to prove myself to the bullies in 7th grade. And so a lot of times in my career, the first half was definitely like, I'm gonna show them, I'm gonna be safe, I'm gonna be free, I'm gonna have enough money, and that is pushing energy, which is very expensive, and you're powered by anger and fear. And
Right.
it sucks.
Yeah.
And huge numbers of executives are that way.
Well, what's the 4th category of person?
Oh, I didn't get to those. Ooh,
No.
Thank you. The 4th category of people is win-lose, and they
Okay.
know it. Those are sociopaths and psychopaths, also 5%. So we have a standard curve.
Okay.
So you want to hire from the upper half of the standard curve whenever you can. And when you have a category 3 in the business, which is everyone listening who runs a business knows, who creates the most drama in your business? The first name that comes to mind, fire them today.
Right.
Right? And your business will improve. It doesn't matter if you need them, because if you truly needed them, a bus could hit them tomorrow. So then you need to replace them anyway, so you have two people, because that's a truly critical person.
I'll say it's the only thing that's been 100% true in my entire professional career is whenever I've delayed firing someone, I've regretted it with not a single exception in a 35-year career, not one.
Fist bump. Say it again louder. If I remember this entrepreneur, Ken, I explained what was going on with that executive I mentioned earlier, and there was some definite, I would say, narcissistic organizations. My culture was disintegrating. I couldn't figure out why. I found out why, because she was telling different people different things about me that weren't sure. People do that. And it's on me to notice and to know what to do. And I didn't have enough experience. So when I look at all those things, what ultimately happens is you have to fire them. And what Ken told me was, are we going to use my phone or yours to fire her right now? And I went through what I just said to you. Oh, but I need her, there's this kind of thing, and all these stories. Bottom line is, if I'd have taken his advice, I would have flown here in a private jet. These mistakes cost me at least $100 million in personal net worth. Right? And I have, because I wrote a book on forgiveness and how to reset triggers, I don't hold anger about this stuff, or frankly, I'd probably get cancer or be a very, very mean person. But the lessons from this, that's why I teach people. I run this thing called the Business of Biohacking Conference. I have about 200 people starting human wellness businesses, and I'm teaching them how to do it. Damon John was on stage with me there last year. I'm working with him. He'll be joining the board of one of my companies shortly. And if only I would have listened, right? And the other thing for younger entrepreneurs who are listening, it's actually something that people with experience, people who've suffered, and the more you can handle suffering without breaking, the better entrepreneur you can be. So if anyone who's been through it, it makes us happy just to share the knowledge, right? And it actually feels good. And so when you are willing to ask and receive good advice, you're actually helping us. It's an act of service for us as mentors, right? So I do my best to teach people so that maybe they don't go through all of the shit that I went through. And the more you can listen, the better you are. And to be able to listen, you've got to be able to remove some of the ego. I know what's best for me. You probably don't.
Yeah, that's the big problem, right? Which is people, I always say that even someone as brilliant as Elon Musk is still going to be wrong 30% of the time. And you're not going to be that smart, so you're going to be wrong a higher percentage of the time of that. How can you be so sure this isn't part of that percentage where you're wrong? And being emotionally invested in being right, in other words, this is saying, would you rather be happy? Would you rather be right? Would you rather be rich? Would you rather be right? I'd rather be rich and happy than right. Although that's the problem is, I'd like to be right just like everybody else, but I'd rather be rich and happy more than I'd rather be right.
When you are truly at peace, what you talked about earlier, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. And I've been working with my kids on this. They're teenagers. And most of us get badly programmed sometime around 10 years old, where being wrong is bad. If being wrong is bad, if I'm wrong, therefore I'm bad. Right? And since you're not a bad person, being wrong feels like it's an attack on your identity. And this stops science, right? This stops business progress. And the bottom line is, it doesn't matter. Everything is just curiosity. Everything is an experiment. Oh, I was wrong. I totally believe that. I used to think that going to the gym 6 days a week, 90 minutes a day, and eating a low-fat diet was going to make me lose weight. And it took me 18 months of beating myself up in the gym before I figured out it didn't work. And that was what got me on the biohacking path. I'm just going to do what works. I'm going to get the data because I'm tired of following crappy advice. Yeah. And the mistake I made that most entrepreneurs make too. Well, if I follow the advice and I know that it works because I heard about it somewhere, if it didn't work, it's my fault. It's because I didn't try hard enough. I'm just going to do it even more. And it creates this horrible suck where maybe it was just wrong. And the data shows it's wrong, but you think you're wrong. And that's not it. It's very black and white.
Part of the epiphany that I've had somewhat recently is, and this probably goes back to, Buddhist and Taoist, philosophy, which is attachment to identity can be a real problem. It doesn't matter what that identity is. Mm-hmm. So I'm attached to my identity as an entrepreneur, as someone who's successful, as a good father, whatever it might be. It's not that you shouldn't be those things, but if you're attached to that, then anything that threatens that, like you were saying, makes you bad or wrong or broken in some way. And ultimately, I think that's what I'm trying to avoid. And I will say that journey is a tough one because it's hard not to.
Here's how to do that. This is the core at 40 Years Zen, the core teaching, and it's the main focus for Heavily Meditated, my new book. And it's called the reset process, and there's 8 steps to it. And it's to let go of a judgment or a trigger permanently, so it doesn't that button is erased. So it cannot be pushed anymore because you took it out of your alert system.
How often do you run this 40 Years of Zen program?
It's every week.
Every week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, every week
is it in person or is it?
It's in person, yeah. You go to Seattle, we have these big pods, and you sit in there with electrodes on your head, and I teach the structured meditation process. But read the book. Like, I tell you how to do it at home. It's just easier with electrodes telling you that you're not deceiving yourself. So it's very big, transformative stuff, like bigger than you're going to see from psychedelics.
Right.
And now ketamine is an option for people because of neuroplasticity there. So this is, family office people, very big entrepreneurs, they come through and like, oh my God, I can run my business better now, and I can run my family life better.
How long is
It's five days. About 9-10 hours a day, and they're intense days. It's
got to do this. I've got to do this.
So I'm not here to sell that. People, they're called to come when they're called to come, but that reset process is about letting go of a grudge or a resentment permanently. So the first thing you do is, all of us have resentments from bullies, and your parents did something at some age that pissed you off. And it's not about judging your parents. It's about it's actually true neurological forgiveness. And it's not about telling someone you forgive them. It's not about saying it's okay. It's just about, I am completely unbothered inside my nervous system by that.
Right.
So the first step is you do it for other people. The second step, you turn around on yourself. And what you're talking about here is self-forgiveness. So if you're a CEO and you have 100 employees and you just laid off 30% of them, you're going to sleep well at night? Only if you're a category 3 or 4.
Right.
Right? Well, the rest of us like, oh man, like all those people, all their families, like, I didn't have a choice. Right? Because the numbers weren't where they had to be, and that's also your fault.
Right.
Right? So being able to forgive yourself for the times that you didn't act the way you wanted with your team, with your family, with yourself, that's actually harder. Right? And a lot of this kind of deep work, you can't do it by yourself. It requires at least another person, sometimes several other people. So the higher levels of personal transformation and evolution, or spiritual stuff even, it requires a small conscious group to do it. And I wouldn't be sitting here the way I am today had I not been fortunate for that.
Look, I could talk to you for hours. So there were 2 other things I wanted to make sure I covered before we had to wrap up. Do you really think we can live to be 180 years?
It's at least 180.
It's at least 180.
Yeah, 180 is not the upper limit at all. So when I wrote my big New York Times longevity book, I'm like, I spent $2 million. I've reversed my age by this much, and I have this big media tour for it. And a lot of people are saying, well, that's not possible. And then I break out. I have a video where Albert Einstein's saying, there is no way that man will harness the power of the atom for energy. Albert Einstein said that.
Right.
And then we have guys like the chairman of the FCC saying, we will never use satellites for communication.
Right.
And a list of 4 or 5 other people, and it ends with a guy named Peter Attia, who...
Oh, I love him.
Well, he says he's a longevity doctor, but in his book, he says, there is no way to extend human life. The best you can do is exercise 2 hours a day so that you're not frail and you'll still die at 86. And I'm like, gross.
Right.
The longevity...
It did seem odd that, your health span can increase, but your lifespan not even at all.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's fear-driven stuff. And the longevity doctors I've worked with for 25 years are not fans of that mindset. They're saying, of course we can do it. So here's why 180 is conservative. Our current best is 120. It's 122. Okay? So everyone listening, that person was born when World War I was fought half on horseback and we didn't have airplanes. Okay? They didn't have antibiotics. They couldn't spell DNA. It's not that hard to spell. They didn't know about it. Right? They didn't understand mitochondria. Like, they didn't have AI, for God's sake. They didn't even have the internet to do research and to learn. Right? So how can we not do 50% better than our current best? And I have 100 years to do it.
That's a fair point, Dave. That's a very fair point.
It's very conservative.
Yeah.
And because I've worked in the field for a long time, I advise longevity doctors, and I've done gene therapy that makes you at least 9 years younger. And this is quantitative stuff. Right. So the fact that people are looking backwards over the last 30 years and saying we can't do it, I'm like, do you not understand an asymptotic curve? So we probably already are at the point where longevity interventions are equal to the amount that we age. If not, it's within the next 2 to 3 years. Okay. Right. So I'm not worried about it unless a truck hits me. And I'm just holding that if a truck hits me, it's going to split in two. Right. So that's the challenge.
So another question I wanted to ask. So what are if there's so many biomarkers, like I've listened to some of Brian Johnson's stuff, 200 and something biomarkers. What are the 5 biomarkers that are the most important, that if you just had to pick 5, that, hey, these are the ones you really want to keep your eyes on?
Brian and I definitely have some similarities, and my full book on this is called Superhuman. And here's the 5 that matter most for you. Number 1 is your sex hormones, particularly testosterone. If you are a male and alive, you have low testosterone. And this is provable.
Right.
And it's provable because, actually, I should say one thing, unless you're treating it. And it's because of microplastics and endocrine disruptors in the world, global, and probably the kind of LED lighting we're using too. But testosterone levels are plummeting. The reason testosterone matters for entrepreneurs, testosterone drives dopamine. Dopamine drives motivation to do things that matter. So Grumpy Old Men is a documentary on testosterone deficiency. You don't want to be that. And we have 25-year-old grumpy old men because they're running around with testosterone levels. I know this because when I was 26, my testosterone levels were lower than my mom.
Wow.
I was 300 pounds, I was obese, I had all these metabolic problems. I fixed that, and I've been treating my testosterone ever since.
Now, do you do TRT, or you do it more?
I do TRT.
Okay, I've been doing that for about 10 years now too. Yeah.
Since I was 26. I went off for a couple of years when I wrote the Bulletproof Diet just to test the limits of it.
Right.
And in the modern world, it's just not going to happen. So you can choose to be weak and unmotivated, or you can go on testosterone therapy. And for men and women, it's true. You just have different levels. Women have 4 times more testosterone than estrogen too. Like, they need it.
Right.
So there we go. Testosterone, number 1, the other sex hormones. Number 2 is thyroid. So if testosterone is motivation, thyroid is energy, and we have an epidemic of thyroid problems, and your doctor's going to say, oh, it's within range, screw that noise. Your TSH should be underneath 1. You should be at the lower end of the range for TSH, and your levels of thyroid markers should be near the upper levels of the ranges, which gives you vibrant, full energy, and it makes you lose weight.
Right.
Get those 2, and you're going to resolve like half your health problems just from those. And then the next 2 are c-reactive protein and homocysteine.
Okay.
Those matter because they're markers of inflammation. C-reactive protein means either you took the test after a heavy workout, that was a mistake, or you have a root canal or an infection somewhere in the body. Maybe your gut's off, but something's causing a kind of inflammation that is much more associated with heart attacks. Homocysteine tells you if you have a genetic problem handling certain types of B vitamins, and then you need to treat that with the appropriate, it's called methylation groups, and it's a nutritional thing. And then the final thing is called LP-PLA2. And this is an enzyme that's released when there's damage to your arteries. Because people are still afraid of cholesterol, even though the science is very clear. Cholesterol does not kill you. People
the whole thing about statins drives me crazy.
Yeah. Well, talk to Peter Attia, who recommends them.
You're right. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Statins should not be.
Doesn't sound like a longevity doctor anymore. But like the statin thing and all that. So, but a lot of people are worried about it. So LP-PLA2, if that high cholesterol is harming your arteries, this marker will go up. So here's the list. Sex hormones, thyroid, C-reactive protein, homocysteine, and LP-PLA2. And this is going to solve the vast majority of things. And because this is a show for entrepreneurs, you should also get a pre-nouveau scan, whole body MRI. I did an interview with them about this, and they called me up about 6 months later and said, Dave, your show saved 25 lives. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, people who came to us because they heard about it there, 25 of the people who came in had life-threatening conditions. Half of them were go to the hospital now, you're about to blow an aneurysm.
Jeez.
And the other half had cancer that they didn't know about that was far enough along that it was life-threatening.
Wow.
But a scan like that can detect 500 kinds of cancer at the very, very early stages. And if cancer is rising dramatically, probably because of a certain injection some people got, whatever. I can't say I know that to be true. It's just the most likely.
Right.
But whatever. So you should be doing preventative analytics on your body with a whole body scan. And bonus points for doing something called a Viome test, V-I-O-M-E. And Viome will tell you what's going on in your gut so that you can modulate that.
Yeah, I just did gut ID, and it wasn't Viome. I did gut ID, and I did a second one that I think do something similar. But you think Viome is best in class?
Viome is best in class because they have the most samples. In fact, they have such good sampling in AI now. They got FDA fast track approval. They can detect oral and throat cancer at stage 1 with 95% confidence by swabbing the microbiome in your mouth. That's how powerful it is.
Wow.
Because your gut bacteria starts in your mouth.
Because I heard that they're starting to predict things like colon cancer much better than a PSA test, doing it with a gut biome test, which is really crazy.
It's totally true.
Honestly, Dave, I could talk to you for hours about this stuff. I really appreciate you making some time, and thanks so much.
You are very welcome. And because we're here talking about biohacking stuff, you can go to ownandupgradelabs.com. If someone's interested in being a partner with me and opening a biohacking facility in your part of the world, I'd love to chat with you.
Great. Dave, thanks again.